every day when we control our mindset in situations that are stressing or upsetting or challenging, and we are able to be optimistic throughout those, we're flexing that muscle and we're strengthening it to the point where as we deal with bigger and bigger challenges, like perhaps, hopefully never cancer, but something like that, we will able to have that same control of our mindset and stay optimistic regardless of our situation.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Eternal Optimist podcast. I'm your host, Matt Drinkon, and today we're going to explore a story of hope, a story of you can do it too, with an amazingly successful guest that we have today. She's been in a number of well-known shows where you can go straight to her website and see all kinds of stuff about the success and about the philosophies that helped to get her there. My guest today is no other than Adrienne Green. And Adrienne's going to share some amazing stuff for us today. So, without any further ado, Adrienne, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing great. And thank you so much, Matt. That's quite the introduction.
Yeah, well, since you said it, you said you're doing great. Why? Why are you doing great today? I mean, you didn't give me the usual, good, how are you? Good. I mean, doing great. Why are you doing great today?
Well, I think part of why I'm doing great is because I've got the mindset of I'm starting out great today, right? There's no amazing thing that happened today. I didn't win $1 million, but I will say nothing really went wrong. So that sounds like a great day to me.
Heck yeah. I love it. Already weaving in wisdom, starting the day with the mindset of, a great day. Love it. Well, so Adrienne, what might be just a couple of bullet points to give some context, like where are you from, how'd you grow up, just a little bit of context before we go into the meat and potatoes today.
Sure. Well, I am a Southern California native who actually lived in many places around the U.S. Growing up. And then I went to college for business, worked in finance for less than a year, switched to teaching, really found that I have a heart of as a teacher and educator, taught high school math, but then was starting my own family, really didn't want to have to leave my kids to go to other kids all day. And we kind of fell into real estate investing. And so that's where I really found that I loved it. I realized that I had an entrepreneurial spirit. So real estate investing led to being a real estate agent. And so I have years as a real estate investor, real estate agent. Started a real estate agent team, sold that last fall, and now my family and I, so I'm married with 3 kids, we travel full time. So we started at the end of February. We travel full time. We've spent a few time traveling in the U.S., 3 months in Colombia, and now we're in Mexico for 3 months.
Wow. 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 I told you there's going to be some context here, team. That was amazing. Well, where are you in Mexico?
So we're in Puerto Vallarta right now.
Oof, Puerto Vallarta. Grew up in SoCal. You taught high school math, my favorite subject. You got into real estate investing. You became a real estate agent. You sold that, and you're married, and you and your family travel full time. Awesome. What a great place to start.
And I didn't even mention what I do now for work. So we have a virtual staffing business because as a real estate agent, I realized how much virtual assistants helped my business. It really is what allowed me to go to the point of starting a real estate team. So then, my husband and I took what we learned about working with real estate agents, started a virtual staffing business. And then I also am offering coaching and working on some online courses for real estate investors to help them run their investments like a business so that they're profitable and time leveraged. And so they can do things like me and travel the world and not be tied down to their real estate investing.
Wow. Awesome. Well, that is who we're going to learn with today, my friends. So thank you, Adrienne, for kicking us off. This is going to be a treat. So I'm curious, you travel full time. Do you do homeschooling, or do your kids go to like virtual school, or what does that look like?
Great question, Matt. So we do homeschooling, and even though I taught high school math, my kids are a lot younger. So right now they're 4, 6, and 8. And I will admit that I had a little bit of an anxiety about oh my goodness, the homeschooling part was one of the bigger mental challenges that I had with this idea of traveling full time, because I was like, I like teaching older kids, but younger kids, And honestly, it's been so much easier than I thought it would be. So they are homeschooled with the state of Tennessee, like that's what they're legally registered as. And what we
Okay.
use is a an online program. It's called Me Academy, miacademy.com, and they have like elementary and high school options, and it really covers all their basics. Because part of us with traveling full time, we need to have a mostly virtual option, right? I wasn't going to lug around a library full of books. And so Me Academy
Okay.
covers all those basic academic subjects, and it's all online. So all we have for each kid is a tablet. Now, we do supplement with that. To me, handwriting is really important. My older two know cursive. I wanted them to keep that up. So we do supplement with some like handwriting workbooks, journals, some paper pencil stuff. But the bulk of it is stuff on their tablets. So, to Me Academy, we use Duolingo to help them with their Spanish in addition to a Spanish teacher. And then there's like a math flashcards app and like a spelling app that they use as well. And they have to do it every day. And I have like a little checklist, and well, Monday through Friday. And we check it off and keep track, because that's one of the things with homeschooling is we do have to keep like an attendance record of what they did and submit it to the state at the end of every year. But at their ages, that's all we have to do. We don't have to do any kind of testing or anything like that for the state of Tennessee. So it's pretty easy.
Wow. I mean, sometimes you never know where the hidden gem is going to show up in a recording, and you just gave me mine. So I'm in bonus time right now because we're in this place where we want to get some of those real life experiences, and we're tethered to the school system and regular. So we travel all the time when we're not in school. So we're considering this homeschool route. And so many friends do that, and your description was so in detail, and it seems like something that's really congruent and you're really aligned with and really passionate about. So thank you.
Awesome.
That was one
Yeah,
gift.
it was huge to not be tied to the school schedule, because as someone who loves to travel, I feel that pain when you travel around the school schedule. Everything's crowded, it's more expensive, and so it's really been freeing to not have to have those limits.
Yeah. Well, thank you for kicking us off and giving us some context, Adrienne. And I'll now like to go back to one of the questions I love to start with. What is the most challenging thing that you've had to endure and overcome in your life so far that you can share with us today?
Well, I think, obviously for everybody it's different because everybody has their own strengths and weaknesses. Um, I'm sure I've had many big ones throughout my history. One of the biggest challenges, I think, to go for a lot of your really ambitious listeners, let's say, who really want to like 10x, right? The challenge is figuring out how to use leverage, right? How to go from
Okay.
just I do all these things, which you're limited by your time and your energy, to how can I have a team? How can I have a community that is helping me do these things? How can I use tools that's helping me do those things? And part of that is figuring out how to do it, right? And part of it is that mindset, that letting go, that realizing that I am the kind of humbling realization, I think, that I am not the best person to do all of these different things. And I think that mindset shift and realizing how to and the power of leverage was really transformational for me.
Wow. Well, because you've done it and because you teach it now and because you're an expert at it now, take us back in time to when it was not as easy for you and you were stuck in that place. What did that look like? So take us to the
Right.
before we get to the
Oh,
after.
yeah. So I think the best example to use would be in my real estate agent business. So, I started as a real estate agent in 2018 when we lived in Northern Virginia, and I was what they would call like a solo agent, right? I wasn't on a team. I didn't have any admins. It was me. And so I had to do everything. I had to learn everything. I had to do all the things. And so it was a very linear system, and I had to do it all myself. Now, the thing is with the real estate agent is like any entrepreneur, right? You are your entire business in one, right? You're your sales, you're your marketing, you're your
Yeah.
operations, your finance. And so, like for me, one of the examples or the things that I think about that really brought me down in the weeds was my monthly newsletter, because I wanted to have outreach, I wanted to have marketing, and I spent countless hours each month putting together this newsletter that the print shop in my office would print and I'd mail to my mailing list. And then I would also email it out, post on my website, all the things. And it did not bring me joy.
Ooh.
I was not especially great at it. And it was not the highest and best use of my time. And so that was just an example of, I think, one of the many things in my business that I was doing myself, even though, because I didn't know or think about how can I hand this off to someone else. And so then as I started to learn about leverage, and what actually happened was I joined a real estate team. So I met somebody who was this coach on this big real estate team. And so I went from being a solo agent to a team. And one of my great strengths is my ability to do R&D, as in rip off and duplicate. Very common in the real estate world.
Nice.
Let's see how someone else is doing it and let's see how we can do it ourselves. And I'm great at learning and applying that way. So in this real estate team, I was able to see all the leverage they had, right? The transaction coordinators, the operations manager, the listing coordinator, the person that went and checked the houses before showings and things, and in the virtual assistants that they used. And in seeing how they leveraged this whole team, I realized that one, it allowed everybody to really stay in their zone of genius, right? In their top 20%. And and then two, because of that, I guess everybody was happier and a better job was done, right? A better
Hmm.
job was done because you could have people who were specialists and who really excelled in this, smaller set of tasks because that was their focus. So my time on the team was short lived because we ended up moving to Tennessee just a few months after I joined the team. One thing, if you'll see hear more about my story, once my husband and I make a decision, we take action right away. We are high D's on the disc profile, so we make a decision and we go. And
Nice.
the great thing was, though, I got a lot from the team in those few months that I was there. So when I transitioned to Tennessee and I had to restart my real estate agent business, I was able to use those lessons learned and really implement my business from day one in Tennessee using those. So one of the examples of that is, I really started, it was January 2021 when we'd moved. I got my licenses in Tennessee and Georgia because we're right on the border. I was ready to start going. And by February of that same year, I brought on my first full-time virtual assistant. I could not afford her at the time, like I did not have that much business. And yet I knew that I wanted to do X number of transactions to make the money I wanted to make. And I could
Okay.
not do X number of transactions if I was doing it all myself. There wasn't
Okay.
enough hours in the day. So I needed a virtual assistant in order to I'll hand off all my, bottom 80%, all my admin tasks so that I could do just the top 20% and do the number of transactions I needed to do to make the money I wanted to make.
Wow. Wow. So you went in, you burned the ships. Pardon the pun. You burned the ships. You went in and you hired someone in a brand new market. You hired someone as your virtual assistant because you knew that for you to hit your goals, you had to get out of the way of all those things. And you hired
Yeah.
someone before you were already like crushing it in business, in this real estate business in your new territory. What
Yes.
gave you the courage to make that hire when you're just getting started in Tennessee, kind of starting over again? I mean,
Right.
yeah,
It was a little scary, to be honest. I mean, I think about when you bring someone on, like you're helping feed their family, right? Like that's what I think about. Is like you're helping them put food on the table. And so you're making a commitment to them that as long as they do their job, you're going to keep paying them, right? Like you're going to keep giving them food on
yeah,
the table. Like I
yeah.
don't want to fire somebody unless they're not doing their job. And so that it was scary. Definitely lost some sleep over it. And yet I think that things like that are kind of an accountability, right? It means that if I did my planning right, if I do my part and they do their part, it's all going to work out. The equation, the math is going to math, right? And so it takes a little bit of faith and it also was accountability to be like, I can't slack off. I not only am I responsible for my own family and putting food on our table, I'm responsible for this lady's family too and putting food on her table. And, I'm sure you've seen the studies like if people are responsible to another being, even if it's a dog, but if it's definitely if it's
Yes.
another human, they level up and they their performance is what they say it's going to be more.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that to be true that, high performers appreciate some level of accountability and saying it out loud. I certainly do. So thank you for that. I wonder, to go from a high school math teacher to a real estate investor, and now you've succeeded at such a level that you're coaching others to do it. I mean, how did you make that transformation from math teacher to successful investor and now leader and thought leader in the space? I mean, take me through
Well,
that. That's just fascinating to me.
sure. And one of the things about my story that I'm very honest with as well is like there was not some huge master plan. I am so impressed when I talk to these real estate investors and they are starting from day one with this great articulated plan, because that was not me. And so, I help
Uh,
people do it now and, learn, but I will say, and I can also be proof that you're still going to be relatively successful with, real estate investing if you, don't have that plan. It's possible. Now, I will say I was also investing in a time when overall the market did really well. So that helped. But anyway, to go back, so I was a high school math teacher, and uh, how we fell into real estate investing. And again, there was no big plan. I was not on Bigger Pockets at the time. I didn't have some big strategy, but my husband and I moved to a new house, and we had this basement, this walkout basement. And after a few months of living in this house, this was kind of like we bought, like, our dream house, this, I guess, like a 5-bedroom house on acreage. But it was just him and I and the dogs at this point, right? We had no kids at this point. We were planning for the future. And after a few months, we're like, we have not set foot in this basement at all. And we were actually driving back home from like a weekend trip. And we were like, you know, we could probably rent it out. It's got its own door. It was plumbed for a wet bar. It had its own bedroom and bathroom. And it was plumbed for a wet bar, but there wasn't anything there yet. And so I was like, well, IKEA sells stuff to like build out kitchens. Like that'd be easy. We were going to drive by IKEA on the way home. And I was like, let's just stop and see what they have and like kind of price it out and everything. And so that's what we did. We stopped and so we had a really big truck at the time, and we ended up buying everything we needed to build out a kitchen area in the basement, where it was plumbed for a wet bar.
wow.
And we bought the cabinets, the counters, all the things. IKEA made it pretty easy, and we loaded it up in the truck, drove the hour from IKEA to the house, unloaded it, and then there was so much stuff my husband had to drive back and get a second load and come back again. Um, so that's the amount of
I can
planning we
relate.
took in. Yeah, yeah, that was our planning as we got started. And then we built out the kitchen. It took a few weeks. We don't have real estate investing in our family or in our history, but my husband worked at a business where some of his coworkers would rent out the houses they used to live in. As they moved up, they'd rent out their old houses. They'd keep them and rent them. And so we kind of talked to them. We got their leases that they used, and I kind of used those as a guide. And we wrote up our own lease. We listed it on, I think Craigslist was like the popular listing place back then. It was, Facebook Marketplace really hadn't taken off. And we got some people in there. And that's how we got started.
Wow. Wow. I mean, yeah, I love it. I love the transparency. You can share that we didn't have this grand, like 50-page spreadsheet master plan for the next 50 years of our lives. You saw an opportunity in your basement, and you're around
Yeah.
people that are talking about things like this, and you took action. And I love that even you went so far as to share multiple trips to IKEA. And that just goes to show you that when there's a will, there's a way. I love the way that your real estate investing started. So what happened from there? I mean, after the basement.
Right. Well, I mentioned too, I think another thing that if people are thinking about getting started, whether it's in real estate or investing or something else, you have to realize that your first step is not going to be life changing, usually, if you just look critically at it. And so, like, we were going to make an extra $1,000 a month. We could have said, $12,000 a year, is that even worth it? I mean, we're going to have to pay more on utilities. We're going to have someone there. It's not even worth dealing with that for 12,000 a year. We could have dismissed it that way. And I see a lot of people do that with real estate investing or something else. They don't see the step one as being transformational enough. The thing is, though, you want a kind of minor step one, because the less the less that big that it's going to be, the less you could potentially lose as well, right? And
Okay.
so kind of
Okay.
a baby step one can be good. That's what I'd mentioned. And so we started off with that. We rented it out. We realized it went well, and that this was the easiest money that we were making. And so we decided to start saving for specifically down payments on investment properties. And again, we were not on bigger pockets. We didn't have some big plan. We were like, and we were at the point where we were starting our family and going to have young kids taking up our time. And so we just focused on the town that we lived right outside of. We were like, because we knew that for the numbers to work where we lived in Northern Virginia, we'd have to self-manage. If you paid a management company, you were going to be in the red every month. And so we were like, we're going to have to self-manage. So let's make this easy. Let's focus on this town. And then we looked at different properties in this town and we ran the numbers, and we found that there was this niche with condos that there were some specific condo complexes where the condo fees weren't that exorbitant. They're maybe $300 a month, but the prices of the condos were less than an equivalent townhouse or single family home, but the rents weren't that much less. So the numbers penciled out nicely to get these condos and rent them out as long-term rentals. So we ended up buying, over the next few years, 3 different condos in the town that we lived outside of and had those as long-term rentals. That was our next step.
Wow. That's how it started. It started small in the basement, and then it went to 3 condos.
Yeah.
And Wow, yeah. Please continue. I mean, I'd like to get to some of your philosophies here
Well,
in a minute, but I'm so intrigued
yeah.
by the story of scale here. This is pretty cool. So
Well,
please
and then
continue on this story. Yeah.
for sure, our next big step was we were in Myrtle Beach for a vacation. And honestly, it was like my mother-in-law had a free week at a timeshare. And so we went to Myrtle Beach because she had this week that she was giving us. And we had just lost out in a multiple offer situation on another condo. So we had the pre-approval, we've been talking to the lender. And so like any real estate investor, I'm like, well, what do leases cost here? What returns do they get here? On Zillow, on AirDNA or Airbnb too, and like seeing that. And I was like, oh, these numbers here are good, right? There wasn't some like big
Yes.
research, like what are the best markets. It was like we were in Myrtle Beach, and I was just like, what's on Zillow? What would that rent for? And we found a place. We found a little like 2-bedroom, 2-bath, townhouse style house that was like a 3-minute walk from the beach. And I was like, these numbers would be really good. I think it was listed for around 175, 180, and it was going to gross around 30 or 35,000. So, just between 15 and 20% there. And so I
Wow.
was like, that's pretty nice. And like, and we could use it ourselves, right? We could have our own little beach house, which is something we had thought about, but the numbers never worked. We hadn't found a place that worked. And I was like, you can get something 3 minutes from the beach walk for 175,000. Like, that's amazing. So we went and toured it with an agent, put in an offer. And that was our first adventure with long distance real estate investing, which, by the way, I am a huge fan of. I have seen it time and again. I mean, now obviously we travel the world, so we manage all our properties as long-term rentals, but one of the things I love about it is it has to stand on its own. The numbers have to work, and you cannot just use sweat equity or doing it yourself to make the numbers work, which I get. Like, that's how I started, is we had to self-manage. And yet you can't scale self-managing local properties to a huge level. You can scale hands-off long distance properties to a larger level.
Huh. Well, of course, that's the teaser. What do we need to learn, or how might we get to a place where we can understand that statement you just made? Because it's playing around in my head, but understanding what your philosophy and then actually getting it all done. You say that it's magical to do it if it's far away or if it's not local, but
Right.
then how do you get that done? So please,
Well,
coach us.
I and I will note, it's not just for real estate investing. I think it can be the same for whatever your endeavor is, or for any entrepreneurship, right? If you have a business where you are a solopreneur, again, like I started as a solo real estate agent, there's only so much you can do. And so what you have to do is you've got to find the people and the systems. Like that's my world, right? People, systems, and technology. I'd mentioned that. I love to use technology, right? To help bridge that gap. And it's a process. That's the other thing I'd say as you get started. You know, we can so often compare our, day one to somebody else's, day thousand and be disenchanted or feel like we can't get there. It's just like starting one day at a time and realizing you don't have to do it all yourself. Having that mental realization and being okay to be like, I don't have to do it all myself. I don't have to go check on that property. I can pay a handyman to go check on that property, or I can pay a cleaner to go check on that property and take photos and send them to me, or I can have a virtual assistant do that email newsletter or anything like that. So I think the first part is like letting that go and realizing other people can do as good or better of a job than you can. And then thinking about, with whatever your endeavor is, where am I really adding value? What's my top 20%? Where am I better than the rest? Because I want to hold on to
Okay.
those things. And what is all the junk that brings me down? What are things that I'm not the best at? What does not bring me joy? What is tedious for me? Because when you hand off those tasks, you're going to feel so much better. You're going to have more time to do your top 20%, and you're going to have technology or someone else handling all those things that don't bring you joy. So your life happiness increases, right? And because of that, your productivity, your what your achievement would also increase. Yeah.
Whew, man. I, One of the things I pulled from your website and from our communication is your mindset. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if you could just riff for us for a minute on the idea of goal setting, mindset mastery, and how that connects for you.
Sure. Well, I think there's really, for me, what's really made a difference in my life is two different opposite ends of the spectrum. One being, let's think big picture, let's think 5 years down the future and set that vision. And then at the complete opposite end, let's think really micro and let's think, what are the things I need to do in the next 3 months? What does my schedule need to look like every day? So let me walk you through that, Matt. So I start my goal setting, and we, maybe do this every year, maybe every 2 years. You don't have to like do the whole process every quarter, right? But starting with where do I want my life to be, and I look kind of at like 1, 3, and 5 years down the road, right? And I think about, well, how old are my children going to be at each of these years? How old are my husband and I going to be? And what do I want our lives to look like? Where do I want us to be? What do I want us to be doing for work, for pleasure? Uh, and I keep it all on Google Drive. I make these into like spreadsheets, and I like that because then I can really easily reference them in the future, right? I can look back on them. So
Okay.
I start with that, and then I kind of, what do I want our income to be? What do I want our lifestyle to be? All of that, and then I kind of say, and again, that's 1, 3, and 5 years, and then I break it down to like, well, what would need to happen this quarter in order to get there? And so, and I kind of break it down into like business, finances, like personal development, and then personal that maybe isn't personal development, personal or
Uh-huh.
family. So I have those 4 areas, and I set like a specific, what in 12 weeks at the end of this quarter, what do I need to see in this specific area, right? Like, do I need to
Okay.
have, as a real estate agent, do I need to have, you know, 12 houses sold or under contract between now and 12 weeks from now? That could be something. Or do I need to have the ability to run a 5K in under a certain amount of time, right? That could be a personal or personal development goal. Do I want to have increased my Spanish speaking ability by some amount, something like that? These goals can run the gamut, right? Do I need to save as much money? Do I need to have a system in place, right? Do I need to have maybe if somebody doesn't have a budget, their financial goal could be that by the end of the 12 weeks, they're going to have a budget that they check weekly, right? And then we say, okay, what needs
Okay.
to happen for that to happen, right? Like if I needed to sell 12 houses or have them under contract within 12 weeks, what needs to happen? Well, maybe I need to make a certain number of calls or contacts every week, right? Maybe I need to tour a certain number of properties. Maybe I need to make a certain number of videos that I put on my YouTube channel and do this every week. And so then we break it down into what's going to happen every week. And then I take that and I time block my calendar. So I say if I needed to have 50 contacts every week, I would time block my calendar with the time I thought it would take to do those 50 contacts a week. And, time blocking I think the magic that made it work for me personally is when somebody told me you're treating it as an appointment with yourself the same way you would treat an appointment with a doctor. You wouldn't just blow off an
Okay.
appointment with a doctor, right? You would take it seriously. You would do everything in your power to show up. And if you couldn't show up, you would reschedule. And so that is, for me, what really helped me make the difference with time blocking. So that, because the first thing people do with time blocking is they set up their calendar and then they don't follow it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've struggled with that before in the past. I mean, was there a point where you had enough is enough and you actually decided to start following your time blocking?
Yeah, it was like a couple things made the difference. One is that mindset shift of like, I'm going to treat this like an appointment with with a doctor because me and
Okay.
my goals is important, if not more important than showing up for a doctor's appointment, right? And then the second thing that really helped was accountability. So, I don't know how much you talk about on the show, but I'm in GoBundance Women, the women's counterpart to GoBundance, and we have
Yes.
weekly meetings with a small group, and we every month, we talk about how did we work toward our goals that month? What did it look like? And we have to kind of report on what we did. And so if I blew off my time blocks for my contacts, well, I know I'm not going to be getting my sales goals, which is part of the challenge. And I'm going to have to go tell my friends in my weekly group that I didn't do the work and I'm not reaching my goals. And what's funny is like how motivational that is.
Yeah. It gets me every time too. Okay. So you treat it as an appointment with yourself, like a doctor's appointment. Respect that. So stick to that. I love that little tiny tweak that's going to give us the maximum impact. I love the tweak. Uh, okay. Well, so what would need to happen this quarter for us to get there? So you break it down weekly. You're time blocking. You've got a plan here. This eerily sounds like you're building these systems. Aren't systems like rigid and kind of like, aren't they like being in jail?
Well, I would argue that systems give you freedom because then it takes the stress away and it takes everything out of your head. You just follow the system and you don't need to stress about it anymore. And you know that it's going to be successful because you developed it all logically. And so it's going to probably work. So I find that systems give you freedom. That's one of my big things. And I think that while it seems counterintuitive, if you give it a chance and you try it out, you'll find that it's often the case.
When you look under the hood, you start to coach and work with people in the real estate industry. I wonder, what are some of the self-limiting belief systems that you first got to deal with before you can get to
Right.
the place where we have the systems and we have the freedom? Like, what do you normally walk into first?
Well, a lot of people, and you probably see this a lot too, Matt. A lot of people just they haven't ever thought of these things before, right? It's like
Yeah.
they've just lived in this very narrow lane of existence and they don't realize that it's like a train on a track, except they don't realize they're not a train. And they don't have to stay on the track. They
Uh,
have feet and they don't have wheels and they don't need to stay on the rails and they can go anywhere. And that can be scary for people, right? If you've always thought your whole life you have to stay on these rails, and it depends on the person, right? Some people are going to embrace it and they're going to be like, sweet. And some people, they're going to maybe go off the track a little bit and they're going to be like, nope, nope. I like the comfort of being on the rails. And, I saw that a lot with the real estate agents on my team. Being a real estate agent is really challenging. I mean, it's a big sales role. You've got to put yourself out there. And I think for many sales roles, the washout rate is pretty high. And we see that in real estate. Most real estate agents leave the field within, I think, 80% leave within a year, 80% who get licensed.
wow.
So yes, it's
Wow.
a tough industry with a pretty high failure rate. And so, again, the biggest part of that isn't the actions. It's not like you are a physician where you need to learn how to do brain surgery, right? It's not like there's this challenging thing or like a physician where you've got to stay up 30 hours or more working, like they do during residency. The actions aren't that challenging. It's that mindset shift of it's all in your control and you have to take these actions and you've got to get comfortable being uncomfortable right? To do things like make sales calls or things like that. So, the mindset part of getting set on these systems is the most challenging thing. And, you can get into what helps a lot is really understanding what people's why are. Why do they want to do it? Why,
Okay.
and is it a strong enough why? And do they really want to do it? Or is it like, oh, this would just be fun? Because if it's, oh, this would just be fun, they're more likely to be, to be one of those washouts. But if they're like, I have this one agent, fabulous. He's like, I've got my son. I want to not have to work like a dog for the rest of my life so that I can spend time with my son. I want the money to send my son to college. I want to be able to get him things that he wants. And it was this really big why that guy, and we talked about it. That's one of the things I'm sure you do too. We talked about it. We brought it out and said, this is why you're doing this. So that when times got tough, he could go back to that and he could remember and he could be like, okay, do I want to tell my son, no, I can't pay for college? Or do I want to make this cold call to someone? Which one is going to be worse? And it puts it in perspective and makes that temporary little discomfort of the cold call something he can totally handle.
I love the way that you just so coolly, calmly delivered that message. A seasoned veteran who can look to what matters most to them and their why over the temporary discomfort of the cold call. Can you go into that a little bit more? Because I think that might be the barrier for so many people is just they're afraid of making that call, that fear of rejection, that fear of something. How did you overcome that, or how are you overcoming that?
Well, so first, I think for people in your audience who are leaders in their space, right, who are leading other people, it's really important in that initial interview to get to that why, right? To have that conversation about what someone's values are, what's motivating them, and get to that why so that you can know. Well, two things. So you can know, and so that your employee or whoever's working for you, so that they know and have it in there. So I think that's one of the big things there is making sure that you and this other person realize it. And then that's where, in order to do the day to day and get over that discomfort, that's where I love the systems and the goal setting in the process, because you're taking your emotions out of it. It's not my emotions. It's not how do I feel today. It's, hey, I set up the system. I have to make 50 contacts per week and I'm going to keep track of that. And it just makes it less emotional and more mechanical, which allows us to get out of our own way a little bit more.
You're speaking awesome words to me. More mechanical, less emotional. As someone who connects probably first in the head and then in the heart, I love that you can frame it that way. I'm making a note, and that's going to go up on a sticky note somewhere for a little while, so I can get that in there. This is great. You start with understand people's whys. I mean, how
Mhm.
instrumental is that to the whole process? I mean, that was the first thing you shared. So is that the most important thing?
Um, I think it is. I mean, and that's kind of like what you're doing when you make your 1, 3, and 5 year goal too. You're kind of finding your why, right? You're kind of finding here's where I want to go, here's what I want to achieve, and that's going to really just be so motivational throughout when you got to do those hard things.
Mm.
Now, there's also a little cheat isn't the right word, but a little bit of a shortcut that can help, which is if something is really tough for you, then that might be a great thing to hand off, assuming it's something that someone else can do as well or better than you can. And so, to continue with this talk about sales calls, no, you as a real estate agent or salesperson cannot hand off all your sales calls. Right. And I will say, like, from our virtual staffing business, we have seen a notable difference where when, like, my husband, who's in charge of sales, makes the sales calls versus if we try to have someone else do the sales calls.
Okay.
I don't need to tell you who's going to have a higher success rate, right? So you've got to think about if there's something that really is a block for you and someone else could do it as well or better, because then that is something you can totally hand off. So, there can be different things along those lines. So, like for me, in my real estate agent business, I loved doing the initial consult calls. Those were great. Potential client, let's have a
Okay.
consult, let's have a one-on-one. There's a lot of paperwork that comes after that. I would do email introductions to lenders if they didn't have a lender. If it was an investor looking to buy in the area, I might do email introductions to property managers, to contractors. I would set up a search on the MLS for them with their prospective houses. I had like a portal for clients. I would set up their account on the portal, and maybe I would email them some
Yeah.
additional resources that were useful. This was like 8 steps, and it was all busy work. And so like to me, that was a block to helping me reach my goals, because I do that initial consult call, I'd feel great, and I'd procrastinate on doing all that follow up. So that was something that I could hand off to a virtual assistant. And what I did, and again, this is like step 1000. So like, don't stress if you would not be here at step 1. But what I eventually got to was I had a form, and we use Monday.com as everything. I'm a huge Monday.com fan. And so I could have
Yes.
what's called a board in Monday.com and a form, and I would fill in, okay, here's the client name. And then we would have little drop down menus like, what email intros do they need? What are the specifics they need for the MLS search? So right after the call, in 5 minutes or less, I could put all of the details into this form. It would go into our system, and then my virtual assistant could do all those follow up steps. And so that's a situation where, yes, I could have just been like, what's my why? I want to get these deals, and I could do it. Or I could work smarter and be like, this is a who, not how situation. Let's get someone in who loves doing, the computer work, and they can do it. It's off my plate. And then I can do more of those consult calls that I love. And we overall reach our goals faster.
Wow. You make it sound so simple. I mean, you literally just weaved a tale that made it sound so simple. How would one get started? Well, first of all, you mentioned a company a couple of times. So you own a company. What is your company that you own in this staffing place?
Sure. So we have a virtual staffing company called Workergenics. That's Workergenix. And what
Okay.
we do is, because everybody hears about virtual assistants, and well, maybe not everybody. Honestly, we run into a lot of people who've never heard of them. And yet, if you hear about virtual assistants, people make it sound so easy, just like I just did, right? Oh yeah, I brought my virtual assistant on. I have them do this. They don't talk about the ones who are no-shows. They don't talk about, figuring out how to pay them. They don't talk about when their Wise account froze up. They don't talk about all this challenge. And I get it. It's tough, right? It's tough to run your business and then learn how to bring on a virtual assistant. And yet, often virtual assistants are the easiest, fastest, most affordable way for people to scale. And so what we do is we are a service where you pretty much subscribe monthly. You tell us what you need. We find a virtual assistant. We place them with you. You don't have to deal with any payroll. You don't have to deal with any HR. You don't have to deal with setting up their virtual phone number. We set it all up, and we just give you this virtual assistant who has their systems in place. We give you a Monday.com portal. You can task them, and they work for you, but you did not have to hire them. You have to manage them in their tasks, but we are handling all payroll, bonuses, paid time off, all of those things. So we try and make it
Wow.
as easy as possible for people to get virtual assistants, and we focus on getting people full-time executive assistants, because that is often the first hire that they need.
Wow. My ears are perking up. The light bulb's going off. This is something that any entrepreneur out there who feels stuck or overwhelmed or has a work-life balance or harmony, it's out of whack. This sounds amazing. Like level one is the administrative things or your EA, and just
Mhm.
I love where you're going with it. How would we get in touch with you, or where can we find you so we can get more information and or hire you, your company?
The best way is to go to my website, adriennegreen.com. So first and last name, ADRIENNEGREEN.com. And everything is there, whatever you would like. We've got links to Workergenics. And I also, for listeners who are real estate investors, I have a free freedom blueprint there that kind of is a checklist for them, a questionnaire of the 10 aspects I think we need to have a successful leveraged real estate investing portfolio. So it's a free download they can get there, so they can kind of inventory their own investing portfolio and realize where they have systems in place that are helping them, and where maybe they could put something in place that would give them more time and more money.
Wow. That simple, folks. And I'm looking at Adrienne's website right now, adriennegreen.com, and it's awesome. It's very transparent, easy to find where you're looking for. So go to adriennegreen.com and check it out. And I mean, it's right here in the very first opening page, the Freedom Blueprint, 10 Essentials for Real Estate Investors. And there's a click button right there. This is not hard to get to the good stuff. It's not hard to squeeze the lemon here and find all the nice juice. So this is awesome. Is there any place else we should go where you might want to go to find you, connect with you on social media, or is adriennegreen.com? Is that the place?
That has links to everything. I am pretty active on Instagram. It's arealgreen.com, or not .com, arealgreen Instagram handle. I try and post some stuff there, and especially with our travels, I weave in that family life and our adventures, as well as some help for other entrepreneurs and investors.
Awesome. Well, this has been it's been very insightful, and it's been very easy to be with you for this time because you're so cool and calm and expert. It's obvious that you have practiced these things. It's not just a theory; it comes from reality and having mastered it. So, thank you for sharing your experience with us today, Adrienne. We have
this has been
made
pleasure,
it to the lightning round. We got a couple questions left, and we'll wrap things up.
Sure.
I'd love to ask you, since you've succeeded at a high level, I mean, the success leaves clues. And if you are a reader, I'm curious if you might have 1 to 2 books that you might recommend to our audience that's had an impact on you.
Sure. One that people may not have heard of that I have read this year is Interview with the Devil. And it's a Napoleon Hill book. We've all heard of, or we may have heard of Think and Grow Rich, but he had this manuscript called Interview with the Devil. And it's a lot like the concepts of Think and Grow Rich. I will say, I think it's a little easier to read and get through, which, Think and Grow Rich can be heavy for a lot of people. And so Sharon Lechter took that manuscript just in the last, I think it was about a decade ago, and finished it, and it was published more recently. And so I think if you haven't read that book by Napoleon Hill, that would be one I would recommend.
Awesome. Well, how about in the music space? If you have an affinity for music, is there a certain artist or genre or a song, something that just lights you up and fills your bucket?
Well, I like most music genres. I'd love, if it's okay, Matt, to talk a little bit about how classical music has been impactful.
Please. Yes.
So a couple things that I've enjoyed about classical, and I was not raised listening to classical. Unfortunately, I do not play any instruments, so it's not like I was raised with violin. But, as an adult, I've taken to listening to classical when I work. It really helps me focus and drown out all the noise, especially literally in a noisy house with kids. But what also I have found classical so helpful with kids. And again, I was not raised listening to classical, but I put it on for the kids a good amount. When we had a house, we had the Alexa speakers. Even now we travel with a portable Bluetooth speaker. And so we can put a classical station on, and it really just helps modulate the energy level, right? The chaos. It helps bring some calm and some order to the world. And I just feel like I'm winning as a parent when my daughter is like, can we listen to some classical music? I really feel like that right now. I'm just like, yes, because that's something I would have never said as a kid. And I'm glad to have given her that exposure where she enjoys it.
Awesome. Is there a particular classical, you said the violin, is there an artist that you recommend we go to first? Because as soon as we finish, I'm going to Spotify to type in something classical. Where would I start?
I actually like on Spotify or on Amazon Music, like the playlists that kind of mix it all up. And you kind of go like, do you want classical focus? Do you want classical calm? And it kind of gives a certain vibe based on what you want. I find that that's been really successful for us.
Oh, I'm in it. I'm about to go into some deep thinking time after we finish this. So I'm going to go into classical. I'm going to try both classical focused and calm. This is awesome. Thank you. Last question, Adrienne, and you'll have the final word here. So last question. You're on the Eternal Optimist podcast. What might Eternal Optimist mean to you?
When I hear your podcast name, what I think of is a story that I heard maybe 15 years ago. And it was our pastor at the time was talking about his mother-in-law who was in the final stages of cancer. And yet every time they went to visit her, and she had so much that she could complain about, probably plenty of aches and pains, right? And yet every time I went to visit her, she just talked about that she was happy and blessed. And that's what I think of with the eternal optimist. I think of how, regardless of our situations, we can control our mindset. And yet, she did not start out probably as a child with that ability. And so, I think that that's a goal and something that we realize every day when we control our mindset in situations that are stressing or upsetting or challenging, and we are able to be optimistic throughout those, we're flexing that muscle and we're strengthening it to the point where as we deal with bigger and bigger challenges, like perhaps, hopefully never cancer, but something like that, we will able to have that same control of our mindset and stay optimistic regardless of our situation.